Well, that's it then. Cameron has done his best. He's rallied the troops. Well, about half of them anyway. Cameron has done the impossible. He tells us he's got a great deal for Britain in the EU going forward. He stood there last week in the House of Commons and ever since and looks like a real statesman, like a man that can get the job done. After these last couple of weeks, I have changed my mind. I have seen the light. The argument for staying in the EU has just become overwhelming. I mean, surely it doesn't matter that the EU is a failing entity. Surely it doesn't matter that one day in the not too distant future, whether the UK are in there or not, the whole EU is coming down. Surely the establishment know best. It doesn't matter that the EU fisheries policy has failed and allowed others to fish our waters dry and even prevents our own fishermen fishing our own waters. It doesn't matter that the EU agricultural policy has failed the UK farming industry and prevents our farmers from playing on a level playing field. It doesn't matter that there's so much red tape for business because of the EU that it literally costs UK businesses billions a year to get through it all. It doesn't matter that the EU charges us £55 million a day. That works out to about £2.3 million an hour. That's £38,000 for every minute of every hour. This just doesn't matter. Cameron's got us a good deal. Now you might start to imagine what we could do at home in the UK with that money that we send to the EU. What could we do if we invested it in our own country rather than sending it to the EU? But don't think like that. We're told Cameron has got a good deal. Don't start thinking that we could in fact feed our own people and house our own people with this money. All this money needs to go to the EU for large corporations and Cameron's good deal. It doesn't matter that the figure of 55 million a day is only ever going to go up. It doesn't matter that this figure will probably go up in line with the use of domestic food banks. Also, it doesn't matter that the EU want to close down power stations and industry across Europe in the name of the fiction that is known globally as global warming. It doesn't matter that when the EU decide to charge the UK an extra 1.7 billion just because they can, it doesn't matter that David Cameron said he wasn't going to pay it over his dead body, I think was the quote. If only we were so lucky, eh? It doesn't matter that he did in fact pay it in 2 installments, therefore meaning he openly lied yet again to the UK people. It just doesn't matter that the EU accounts haven't been signed off for 20 years because of fraud. It doesn't matter that there are over 100 billion in EU payments that auditors refuse to sign off. That doesn't matter. We need to be part of this massive club. We need to be part of this huge club that decides our future because David Cameron says so and he must know best. So what if the EU parachutes in technocrats who also happen to be former Goldman Sachs employees to run countries? And so what if the EU has to push democracy to one side to get things done? They know best. And we must support the EU and Cameron because they know what is best for the banks, and what is best for the banks is best for everybody else. Who needs democracy nowadays anyway? Democracy is so last season. The EU get really annoyed when you start talking about democracy, but so what? Who cares that the EU can demand that its population pay the gambling debts of bankers? I would happily pay for the bankers' gambling debts. Any sane person would. It doesn't matter that the EU's new bail-in policy is to take your savings and give it to gambling bankers. That's the right thing to do. Who cares that the real power in the EU is the EU Commission and not the elected EU Parliament? Who cares that the EU Commissioners are all, every single one of them, unelected? Who cares that they're selected and not elected? And who cares that they're selected by their chums? Who cares that the population in the EU cannot vote for, vote against, or ever remove an EU commissioner? Who cares that the EU commissioners are dictators, pure and simple? Who cares that the EU Parliament is 100% ceremonial and only there to give the illusion of democracy? Who cares that even if the ceremonial EU Parliament vote 100% against a new law, the EU Commission can ram it through to the nation states regardless? And if they don't comply, they get huge fines. Who cares about that? Who cares that democracy is a bloody dirty word in the EU? It doesn't matter that the EU want an EU army to rule over our own military. It doesn't matter that people's sons, fathers, granddads, great-granddads died in wars to protect our sovereignty, the sovereignty of our country that has now sheepishly been handed over by lying, cheating, self-centered scumbag politicians. They gave it away while we slept. That doesn't matter. Cameron knows best. We all know that the deal Cameron has been offered isn't legally binding, and we will one day end up in the United States of Europe. But who cares? Who needs to stand on their own 2 feet? We need to be governed by people we can never vote for, vote against, or remove from power. That's the new democracy. Come on, Cameron's got a great deal. It doesn't matter that when there's a free trade agreement being negotiated in the EU, any UK politician isn't even allowed in the room. Unelected foreign people clearly know what's best for the UK better than people from the UK. It doesn't matter. Why do we need to control our borders? Letting in as many people as we can is a good thing. Who needs less than 40 kids in each primary school class? What's the point in having a school bursting with 2,000 students when you could have it even more bursting with 4,000 students? Come on, people, Cameron has got us a good deal. After all, I can't see any borders from space, can you? Who cares that Jean Monnet, one of the founding fathers of the EU, wanted a United States of Europe, run by unelected bureaucrats, without the people of Europe ever knowing about it? I'm sure he wanted it for the good of the people rather than the large corporations and banks. It doesn't matter that we need to be in the EU to help us fight terrorism, the same terrorists that Cameron helped to create. Who cares that the EU provoked Russia, causing the standoff in Ukraine that we are currently seeing? Who cares that the EU actually put neo-Nazis in control of Ukraine? Does it really matter that the EU as well as NATO want to put nuclear weapons on Russia's doorstep? An act that Russia said is an act of war? That doesn't matter. Cameron is right. We need to stop opposing him. Surely paying billions of our tax money to unelected dictators that we can never vote for or against or ever hold to account is better than keeping the money ourselves, spending this money on our own population to feed and house the poor. Who wants to do that? I'm with Cameron. We need to back Cameron and make sure the big corporations and banks continue to get billions in tax refunds and billions in taxpayers' money and savings. We need to stay in the EU and make sure nations are brought under control of the EU Commission. And to be honest, who needs sovereignty? Who needs to govern themselves? Just switch off, plug in, and forget all about it. This is why, on the 23rd of June, I'm voting leave. Do you see what I've done there?